The Boscombe Valley Mystery is the fifth story in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, first published in 1891. In this case, Sherlock Holmes is called upon to solve a murder that appears to be straightforward, but is complicated by conflicting evidence and the apparent involvement of a seemingly innocent young man, James McCarthy. The story begins when Holmes and Watson are summoned to the town of Boscombe Valley, where a murder has occurred. Charles McCarthy, a wealthy man, has been found dead, and his son, James McCarthy, has been arrested for the crime. James was seen standing over his father's body with a gun in his hand, and it seems that he had a motive. He stood to inherit his father's fortune, which had been in question due to a dispute over the estate. The police are certain of James' guilt, and he is promptly arrested, but his behavior seems oddly innocent, which causes some doubts. James McCarthy insists that he is innocent and that he did not murder his father. He claims that he was the victim of a conspiracy and that the real murderer is someone else, but he is unable to provide a clear explanation of what happened. Desperate for help, James turns to Sherlock Holmes, hoping that the great detective can uncover the truth. Holmes, intrigued by the case, agrees to investigate. Upon arriving at Boscombe Valley, Holmes and Watson visit the scene of the murder, where they find a disturbing set of circumstances. Charles McCarthy was found in a field, and it seems that he had been shot at close range. There are indications that the murder was not a random act, but rather something more deliberate. Holmes begins to observe the details of the scene, noting several peculiarities, including the position of the body, the location of the gun, and the presence of a mysterious witness, a young woman who had seen a man leaving the scene of the crime. Holmes then turns his attention to the relationship between James McCarthy and his father. The two had been estranged, but they were believed to have reconciled recently. Holmes also learns that the elder McCarthy had been involved in some shady dealings, and there was a hidden secret in his past that could have provided a motive for the murder. Despite the strong circumstantial evidence pointing to James, Holmes is not convinced that he is the killer. Holmes' investigation takes him deeper into the history of the McCarthy family. He learns that Charles McCarthy had been a dishonest man with a criminal background, and that his son may have been trying to distance himself from his father's shady dealings. Holmes also interviews the witnesses and uncovers an important detail, a conversation between Charles McCarthy and his son just before the murder, in which the elder McCarthy was heard to accuse James of having something to do with his past misdeeds. Holmes begins to piece together a theory that involves the younger McCarthy being wrongfully implicated in a murder that he did not commit. Holmes' deductions lead him to a surprising conclusion. The true murderer is not James McCarthy, but a man named John Turner, who had been in a long-standing feud with Charles McCarthy. Turner had been involved in a violent confrontation with McCarthy years earlier, and it turns out that he had been hiding his identity by using the alias of John Turner. Turner had been seeking revenge for a past wrong, and he was the one who had murdered Charles McCarthy. The key to solving the case is the fact that Turner had a distinct physical characteristic that helped Holmes make the connection. Holmes reveals that John Turner had been hiding his identity by pretending to be someone else, and that it was Turner who had killed Charles McCarthy in a fit of anger. He had mistakenly assumed that James would be blamed for the crime, and thus he had framed the young man for murder. The true motive behind the crime was Turner's desire for revenge, and his desire to protect a dark secret from his own past. Holmes exposes the truth to the authorities, and James McCarthy is exonerated. The Boscombe Valley Mystery is an excellent example of Holmes' ability to solve seemingly difficult cases through careful observation, logical reasoning, and an understanding of human nature. Holmes' investigation is marked by his usual attention to detail and his methodical approach to uncovering the truth. The story also highlights the theme of mistaken identity and how easily one can be wrongly accused, especially when the evidence is overwhelming and circumstances are misleading. At the conclusion of the case, Holmes reflects on how the solution came together, and the police are impressed by his skill in uncovering the truth. The story underscores Holmes' ability to see beyond the obvious and to focus on the small details that others might overlook. Through his deductive genius, Holmes proves once again that no case is too complicated for him to solve, and that he can always find the truth, even in the most puzzling of circumstances.